the manipulation that you have to do with other people to get them to stay there is absolutely necessary. I don't think anyone truly gets up every day and goes to their office and says, wow, I'm so grateful for this job. I'm enjoying this. I'm financially stable. Everything is perfect. Couldn't have asked for anything better. You have to be delusional to work there. I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to leave my leader. I wanted to see my leader get promoted. I was trying to stay there to help them get promoted. It's always an emotional tie that keeps people there. It's never really anything else. And that's why I'm led to believe that, I mean, they have to kind of string you along and kind of play with your emotions a little bit just to get you to stick around. Because otherwise, I mean, yeah, who in their right mind wakes up every day and is like, I'm so excited for leaders meeting. I'm so excited for the field. Can't wait to see if I close. Like, it's just, it's miserable.
Usually what happens with these interviews is the day we do the interview, that's the first time that I talk to the person I'm speaking to. Taylor, you and I have communicated a few times already. And during those conversations, I was taking some notes. So some of the questions that come up today are probably going to come from those initial phone conversations. And the first time we talked was actually about 2 months ago. And I think the first time you reached out, you were still with your Cydcor office.
Mhm.
So my first question to you is, first, what led you to, these videos while you were still in Cydcor, and why were you reaching out at that point, even though you were still technically a part of Cydcor?
Honestly, I had started noticing that things were very off for a while, but I think I just didn't want to believe it. I was kind of in like this denial state. Um, and I think, it really started with my first leader. She had left the business before I did, and she had been just telling me all these things like, this is a scam. Our owner, his name was Michael, and she just said, Michael's a scammer. um you know just things that happened between her and him, and then some other people in the office. At this point, we basically were kind of split into two offices, because we were on a B2B campaign and then a residential campaign. She had moved over to the residential side when I stayed on B2B. So I was a little bit out of the loop with residential stuff. And I think that there were some shady things going on there. And she had left the business, but we still stayed in touch.
Mhm.
So, we would call each other on the phone and just talk about how much we just couldn't stand the job anymore. And we just decided to kind of snoop on like Indeed and like Glassdoor, read all the
Mhm.
reviews. And I think that's kind of when we were like, oh, okay, they're not wrong. But,
Yeah.
I think just reading those things, I was like, okay, I was a little skeptical. So I was just waiting for more confirmation over
Sure.
time. And I think the one day I just was kind of losing it, I just decided to search on every platform, Cydcor, scam, like anything related. And that's when I found your page and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I had watched all the videos and I was like, it's so odd feeling, like the feeling that I got watching it, because I knew exactly what they were talking about. It's
Yeah.
not like it was something that did not ring a bell at all. Everything was very, very familiar, and I really related to all of it. And I think that's why I was like, yeah, I'm ready to leave. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And one of the things you mentioned in one of our conversations was that your owner had, I guess, had spoken to you about talking to people who had left, and he found out about it, and I guess he kind of confronted you about it, right?
hmm Yeah, so about the time I left, prior to that, it was kind of a domino effect. Um, the new starts, they came and they went, so
Mhm.
that was nothing new. But when I think things started to hit the fan when um it was leaders that had been in the business for at least a year or more started leaving. And I think that's when my owner started kind of like shaking in his boots a little bit. So there was there was kind of a situation with a couple people in the office that completely changed the office dynamic. So one of our senior leads, now our office had, when it came to the structure of like positions, we had senior lead.
Okay.
It was kind of the halfway point between, yeah, leadership and assistant manager. So one of our senior leads, a lot of people were sticking around on her crew to get her promoted. But then we found out that she was pregnant with someone else in the office, a leader on her crew.
Mm.
And it kind of changed the dynamic a little bit. So things started to change rapidly around the office. Leaders started to leave. That's when kind of her team kind of fell apart. And I had a pretty good relationship with just about everybody in the office. Inside of work and outside of work. So I remember when we had attended the baby shower for her.
Mhm.
Um, that's when a lot of people had left the business already and they still went in support. And I was kind of like hanging off the edge. Like I had one foot in, one foot out at this point.
Mhm.
So there was a couple people that I had a conversation with in the parking lot after the baby shower ended. And I won't lie, we were sitting in my car talking for hours and just talking about, leaving because I had expressed I want to leave. And I was a little afraid to, in a way, even though I knew that nothing really bad was going to happen. I think I was just avoiding that interaction.
Yeah.
So, I had talked to these people for hours in my car. And then, the next day, I was questioned about why I was talking to them in my car for so long. And, that's when my owner was like, well, it wasn't about work. And I'm like, not even, at this point, I'm like, I'm not even gonna lie. I'm like, yeah, we talked about work. And he's like, yeah, because I figured, and within those 2 hours, he knew how long I was out there for. Um, Work had to have came up. And I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, at this point, I was so done with it. I just didn't care. I was just like, yeah, we did talk about work. We did talk about business and why they left because, they're my friends still. I still have
Mhm.
really good friendships with them. So at this point, like I'm like I can talk to whoever I want. So
Yeah.
it felt like it was kind of like I was betraying almost.
Yeah. And that's really strange from a normal job point of view for anyone to get kind of that upset about talking to people who were no longer there. I mean, I can understand in some instances maybe there was a very toxic individual and they left the business on bad, or a normal business on bad
Yeah.
terms, and it's kind of like, you might want to not discuss things with this person, but it's almost like in a
Mm.
way that he wanted to monitor what you were talking about and keep tabs on everybody. And I know you mentioned as well that he didn't, there was a point where he straight up didn't want people to leave, and he was attempting to try to keep people to stay, like you had mentioned earlier, once these long-term leaders started to go, um, that he probably felt like something was going on here. um, was he fishing for like, well, what did you talk about specifically, or anything like that from that conversation?
He was kind of fishing, and I mean, it's at that point, I think like he already knew who wanted to leave because I know for me at that point, I just couldn't really put on a face anymore. and pretend that I wanted to be there. Like, he knew, because I would have to do one-on-ones with him every single week.
Yeah.
And the past couple one-on-ones he mentioned, he's just like, yeah, you had nothing really to say. And I was like, yeah, I really don't have anything left to say.
Yeah.
I was just kind of there because I had to. So, you know, there's been situations where it seemed like he was fishing for, you know, what we talk about, what I talk about with other people in the office. I know that there's been some situations about, you know, like me expressing my frustration about something. And, you know, I was always pulled aside into the office, and I was always told, like, you can't say that to this person. You need to come to me about this. When, you know, how I view it as, I understand, like, nobody wants to be around like negative people, but people have emotions. And, you know, the work that we were being asked to do, it was just getting ridiculous to a point where I couldn't hide it. I have gone to my car straight after like morning atmosphere, and before leaving for the field, I've gone to my car and like cried. And, you know, obviously people that I'm close with in the office, they would be concerned and they'd want to know like what's wrong with me. They'd want to be there for me. People, other leaders on my team, entry levels even. And of course, it was always, don't ever vent down, always vent up, meaning, yeah, vent to your leader, vent to the owner. But, you know, it just got to a point where I was like, there's no point in venting to you because you don't offer any solutions. It's always flipping things around onto me. It's always the gaslighting. But at some point I kind of realized that the office like dynamic was very strange, because people, not just the owner, people were always fishing for what this person's talking about with that person. It was like everybody's business was my own, my business was everybody's business. I couldn't say nothing without the whole office finding out about it, even if it's something like just personal, like me talking about like a personal problem at home that I'm dealing with. Everybody knew. I couldn't really freely talk about anything. I felt like I couldn't really trust certain people. You know, the leaders I had on my crew, I had a crew of all girls. So, you know, I got along really well with them, and, you know, I trusted them a lot. So I would always, you know, go to them, they'd come to me. And I think a lot of people did feel comfortable with me just because I was a little bit more of an emotional person. And when we want to express our emotions and we're not free to do that, you know, I know a lot of people like did come to me, but I did get a lot of backlash on that. Like, oh, you're not their leader, you shouldn't be talking to them. Or, you know, what are you talking about with this person? They're an entry level, you shouldn't be talking to them about anything. It was just very strange. It was just very catty, very immature.
During our first phone conversation, I highlighted the word psychological. And I remember that one of the things you told me, and this was very early on in the conversation, so I made sure I wrote this down, was your quote, "I feel traumatized." And I don't know, I feel like when we're talking about a job, even a job that's supposed to be an opportunity that leads you to great things, that's a really strong word to describe something like that. And obviously, a lot of trauma can come from psychological manipulation. So I'm curious, and you can go as deep into this as you'd like. What made you feel compelled to describe this Cydcor experience as something that has traumatized you?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that cake. So I think what it was I had fully delved into the business. I was like, you know, like this deep in. And I think in order to get anyone there, you have to consistently beat things into people's heads. You have to consistently try to rewire their brain. And I think I was over time, I didn't realize that that was happening to me. I thought, all the things about being positive and being very motivated. And I think that's who I am as a person. So I thought all these things were good for me. This was good for me to be in this environment. And then I started to realize over time, it was just very toxic. I mean, my owner had even told me I need to go to therapy. So, because I'm not exaggerating, I would be in his office a couple times a week crying, just bawling my eyes out because, the stress of the work that we were being asked to do, on top of I wasn't really sleeping. I was very, very sleep deprived every single day. I would get up, I'd have to be there because I did B2B. So our schedule was be at the office for a leaders meeting at 7:30. If you have a one-on-one, you're probably there at 6:30, 6:45. And then we work till 5. And then, of course, team nights and stuff like that afterwards. So you're out all day, up all night. So I think a lot of the physical factors, me just not really getting any sleep, it honestly reminded me of my college sorority. Now, I'm not sure if anyone's made that like correlation before, but I'll admit my college sorority, we did some things that maybe we shouldn't have. But it was weird because it brought back some of those memories. The whole sleep deprivation, just constantly being gaslit every day. I was always told that, I was just losing my attitude all the time. And I find myself to be a very hardworking person. I know I have a good work ethic. I've been working since I was 16. So I feel like I was perfect for this place. The person that they were looking for, I knew they probably looked at me and said, she's someone that we can really get into her head. Because they knew that, I'm willing to push myself. I'm willing to scrape by and make sacrifices. But it got to a point where I was just mentally drained every day. I was very emotional, and emotions was always looked at as like something that should not exist in our office. It was like you can't be upset, you can't be tired. Even if there was one day where I was just a little bit more tired than usual, I would get kind of called out for it, like, oh, like, did you not sleep last night? Like, what were you doing? Did you go out? And I'm like, no, I was at team night all night, and then I had to go home and prepare my route for the next day. I had to go fill out this and that. I got 4 hours of sleep. That's why I'm tired today. So it was very like exhausting overall. And I think the financial aspect of it is what really pushed me to just leave, because I had been in the worst financial spot I've ever been in my life. Mind you, I do still live with my parents, but like I pay for a lot of my own things, and I'm also trying to move out of my parents' house. And I always express that to my owner, like this is my goal. I want to have the money to move out and do things on my own. I want to be independent. I'm 24 now. So the fact that I was constantly going to the field, and there were several days where I'm not closing, and I was pretty good at sales, but we had switched campaigns. So there was a big shift in that that affected just about everybody in the office. So, just going to the field every single day, doing the same thing over and over, it became very redundant. And I was not making the money I wanted to be making. I had my weeks where I did make pretty good money, but it wasn't consistent. And that's what I had always talked about with my owner. I was like, look, yeah, this is great. It's great to make $1,000, $1,200 a week, but that's not every week. And what I need is something stable. And it was always, well, you're probably just not following all the systems. You're probably just losing your attitude. And I'm over here saying, like, hey, I literally don't know how I'm going to pay my bills this month. And you still want me to be here.
Yeah.
And it's always, well, just give it another week, keep trying. And, oh, we'll put you on a team day with somebody. I don't know if you know, team days is like, when someone's like having a mental breakdown, they'll send them with somebody for the day in the field so that, they don't absolutely lose their mind.
Yeah.
So it was always, just trying to kind of shut me up is what I noticed. It was always just something to keep my mouth shut and just to keep me going. But I was working like a dog and sweating like a pig every day. Doing the field in the winter when it's snowing like 2 feet outside. I'm sure you are aware of like Chicago winters. So,
Oh, yep.
being told that, hey, you still have to go to the field, even though there's like 3 feet of snow outside. And I'm like, look, if I get into an accident, are you going to cover my car? Are you going to come get me? No. So the best way to describe the feeling of working there every day was, it was like I was being taken out a boat into the middle of the ocean and just shoved overboard. And I was told, you're either going to sink or you're going to swim today. I felt like I was just fighting every single day. So yeah, I was mentally, physically exhausted. Financially, I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wasn't able to really eat in the field, unless I had brought food from home. And it just wasn't a way I wanted to live my life. And I'm like thinking, at first I was so happy there. And then it came to this point where it's like, this is just not a way to live. This is not the way I want to live.
I think your analogy there of the ocean is perfect for this. Because they will tell you that they give you all of the tools, right? Like you mentioned, it's all the systems. This is biblical law to these companies. It's the systems. Everything that is not the systems is nothing. And armed with those systems, then if the boat sinks, the systems are your life raft, right? If the boat stalls, the systems are the wind that get the sails moving again. It's always the systems. And of course it's not true, because if these systems actually worked, then everybody who used them correctly would be making thousands of dollars every day. And that of course doesn't happen. And you talked about being mentally drained. And I think most people who leave eventually get to a point, myself included, where you can't even really function because you are sleep deprived. And even if you were getting a solid 8 hours, you're still being put in situations that no person working for any respectable company should ever find themselves in every single day. And yeah, that's definitely going to take a toll on you. Do you feel, because of your experience in your sorority, that when you started to recognize some of those similarities, that it was almost normal, or that this is what a job should be because it's difficult? Or like, was there any idea of this is just how it's supposed to be?
I think at some point I thought, because you have all these morning meetings, you have all these leadership meetings that are always about just being all about the business and working really hard, maintaining that strong mentality and doing those things. I think at some point I thought, okay, maybe this is good for me, maybe this is what I need to do. And mind you, like, I had a complete like career change after I had graduated from college. So my direction was completely shifted. So I think when I got to this job, I think I noticed just how intense things were. And obviously I didn't have really much to compare it to, because most of my jobs that I had in high school and college were hosting, waitressing, bartending, the typical during those years. So obviously those jobs were very, very different from what I was doing at Cydcor. So I think I didn't really have much to compare it to. I think when I started to notice the similarities between my sorority and Cydcor was just when things started to get really toxic. I think the controlling aspect of it, because I think I did see a lot of emotional control at both places. Mind you, like my college sorority, we obviously that was a little bit more of like a emotional kind of hazing tactics that we used. And I think I noticed, I was like, these feel like hazing tactics here. Just the mind control, the constantly putting things into people's heads and saying the same things over and over and over. It was just like, if you like were starting to kind of lose your attitude in the field, it was like, well, do you care about being an owner? Do you care about having an office? It was stuff like that. And then with my sorority, it was like, if you didn't pay attention and actually did the work for the pledging process, it was like, do you even want to be in the sorority? So it kind of felt like the same. So I think that's when I noticed, I was like, this is really odd. And I, like, mind you, since then my sorority had been removed from campus, so that situation has been resolved, and I had gone through all the aftermath of it, of learning, hazing's not good. So I think learning about all that and then kind of realizing what it does to people, and then coming to Cydcor and seeing kind of the same tactics being pulled, it was just a very eerie feeling. I was like, this is all too familiar.
When we first talked a couple months ago, you had expressed concern about coming forward because you were a little bit worried that the office that you were leaving might try to retaliate against you in some way. You said that it was a really slick operation. So, and I don't think anybody should ever feel scared to speak out against a former employer. I mean, as long as it's based on grounds that what you're speaking about isn't made up and it's not out of spite or anything petty like that. So if you're comfortable, like what were you primarily concerned about, and why did you feel a kind of a sense of uneasiness about telling your story?
I really wish I had a solid answer for that. I think it was just, I was so unsure of what would happen. I think because of the amount of people that were leaving over time, I knew that every time that somebody had left, there was always a conversation during leaders' meetings about, this person just decided to give up on themselves. They failed. They're going to go work at a dead-end job. So don't worry, guys. Like, it was very manipulative. And, for a while, I kind of was just like, oh yeah, they kind of did just give up on themselves. Like, I had agreed at one point. Sure. And then I think when I started seeing people that I was actually very close with, I knew their situation when they had left, and seeing that same thing being said about them, I was kind of just like that's really wrong. And that's not exactly why they had left. So I think I knew that things were going to be said about me. And they were, because I still had friends in the business. But I think I just wasn't really sure what was going to happen. I don't believe anything has happened to anybody who had left, but I just knew that there was going to be an attempt to kind of just flip the cards around. And I just wasn't sure how my friends and people that I have close relationships with that were still there would react, or if they would even react. So, but honestly, since then, I'll admit just about every single person I had started with in the business is gone from there. I believe there's only one leader left currently. So I think everybody was kind of on the same page. So maybe my fear was just out of really nothing, anxiety, but I think I just knew how good he was at just kind of flipping the cards around, that I just wasn't sure if he was going to really do that with me or not. And our conversation the day I had quit kind of made me realize that he was already on his way to doing that, because the day that I went in to quit, I came in, I was supposed to be sitting in a promoting leaders meeting, which is basically the senior lead meeting. I was very close to being promoted to senior lead, and I decided to sit out of it, and I said I just wanted to talk to him, and he was like, you're gonna have to wait. That's not fair to the other leaders here. And I was like, that's fine, I'll go wait in your office. So as soon as he came in and was like, well, what's going on? Like, he kind of just had this like attitude. And I was like, I think the conversation I'm about to have. I think it's time. And he kind of just sat back and was like, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna pull the plug with you, honestly. And that's what his words were. And I was like sitting there thinking, okay, you were gonna pull the plug with me, even though I had the biggest crew in the office at the time. I was interviewing, I was training every week. Me alone was doing like a quarter of the office production, and my crew was doing more than half. So I knew that it was whatever was going to come out of his mouth, it was going to be very manipulative. And I knew that, yeah, as soon as I left, he would try to flip the cards onto me. But I think a lot of that was just out of fear. But I don't believe anything's really happened to a lot of people after they left. I think one of the things I feared was just not getting my last paycheck or two, because several people, when they had left, they did not receive their last couple paychecks. And those paychecks, they weren't very high, but I needed the money.
Sure.
Very much. So I think I was also fearful that he was going to withhold that. So, because I don't know what you do about that. So many people, they had left and they texted me, they're like, I never got my last check. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's illegal. So yeah. I don't know what I really feared. I think it was just not knowing how it was going to pan out. And I think that's what I feared the most.
Yeah, not paying your employees for work they've done is illegal, but Cydcor doesn't really seem to care about that. That's something that I'm sure your owner has had discussions about. He's been filled with these comments from these consultants and whatever. And when I look at photos of your owner, he's the walking cliche of Cydcor. And having been in Cydcor as long as you were, for a year-ish, I think, you, I'm sure, met a lot of other owners, a lot of people, big names in Cydcor. And I've talked to so many people in Cydcor that pretty much just describe these people all in the same way. Is there anything unique about them? Are they pretty much just cardboard cutouts of each other? Like, and you can use your owner as an example, but like, is there anything worth talking about these people that makes them unique, that makes them special, or are they just programmed robots in a sense?
It's crazy because a lot of the big names that come up when you just search up Cydcor, I've met quite a few times. So I know, like, my owner, I'll admit, like, he's a very put together man. When you first meet him, he has a very like welcoming personality. You know, he speaks very highly of things, and he does put on a very good show, I will say. You know, it's not until over time that you kind of see through what he's saying. It's very easy to believe what he says for face value. Just the way he is, the way he talks to people, very charismatic, a very like nice, warm personality. But I think over time, just seeing all the things that were going on, the way he was talking to me, talking to other people, I kind of just grew this like resentment towards him. But I think it's very easy to kind of just fall into that pit of like, oh yeah, he's such a humble person, very charismatic, like very easy to like. And then of course some of these big names, now I know he hung around a lot of consultants. I don't remember all of their names, but I know he was pretty close with some of them. I know like I've seen I think Brandy Parker a few times, Ken Lear, Andy Bruinger. He had an office out of the same office space, which I didn't know there was like 5 different owners in the same office space until a few months ago. And, you know, of course, the big name that you see a lot on the internet is Michael Sessions. So I've met him quite a few times. I've met these people at some of the quarterly conferences. And then I also was invited to Keys to Success in Orlando back in March. So I did get a chance to meet a lot of these people. Now, a lot of them, you wouldn't think anything very different about them when you first meet them. And I think that's kind of what I said to some people after, you know, all these conferences and things like that. I was kind of just like, they seem like normal people, but if you paid attention to what they say and how they word things, it's all the same script. Just, you know, they kind of just add their own story to things. Now, I know the one consultant that ran his office out of our office space, Andy Bruinger. I'll admit, like I don't have too much against him. Like he was honestly really, really nice to me. He was nice to everybody. But he still said the same script when he would come in and talk to us. He would have consultants come in and do big picture talks and opportunity meetings, things like that.
Yeah.
Every so often. I think when people started to kind of get burnt out, then he's like, okay, I think we should do a big picture talk, opportunity meeting. It was kind of just like a routine thing. And, you know, Andy would come in, and I honestly felt like I kind of related to him a little bit in the sense of like how he got started in the business. So I didn't have anything against him, but, you know, he kind of just kept to himself. And then would talk to us and kind of give his own sob story, and then the usual opportunity meeting. It was kind of the same thing over and over. I think that's one of the first red flags I noticed, was just the opportunity meetings. I was kind of confused as to why we were doing them so often, and why are we saying the same thing every single time, and taking notes, because I was like, I don't think I need to take notes on this. I mean, people are just kind of sharing their stories. But I do know that Michael Sessions is a big name that comes up a lot. And I know that he used to run an office out of Oak Brook as well at some point. But I know he's been in, I believe, Arizona or something. He would come in every so often, and he would just sit with the leaders in our conference room and like do a little Q&A session with us. And it was always like, oh my God, that's Michael Sessions. He's a big consultant. He's got a podcast. Mind you,
wow.
mind you, he's got like all these like pending lawsuits against him.
Yes, he does.
And we didn't even like know about it. It was always like, oh, Michael Sessions is coming in, take out your notebook. And I was like, why? Like, I was so confused. And they were like, just take notes. And I'm like, I'm the type where I'm just like, I'd rather sit and listen. If they say something so aspirational, I'll write it down. But like, I was just kind of like, this is not lecture hall. This is really weird. And I remember, he was kind of talking about, how to find out what your new starts really want. And he's like, that's the way to grow. Find out what they want, find out their goals. That way you can kind of tailor everything to them and, what they want. So I remember him kind of using me as an example, because I was like honestly just sitting like right there, right in front of him, and he kind of was just using me, using my responses as an example. And he had asked me like, oh, why are you in the business? And I just said like, I want control over my growth and how much money I make. Commission is something that would motivate me a little bit more than an hourly pay. And I remember it was kind of embarrassing in front of the whole office. He was kind of like, oh, okay, your boyfriend must really love you because you seem like a really controlling person. And I was just like, I sat there like,
What the
yeah.
hell? I'm sorry, but what the
Yeah.
hell was that? Like that's the stupidest
Yeah.
response I've ever heard.
I was kind of taken back by it. I was like, okay, first of all, I don't have a boyfriend. Second of all, who are you? Supposedly this big name in Cydcor, and you're coming up in the office and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I don't want to deal with this right now. So I did notice, just the office atmosphere in general. I know a lot of people joked around a lot, but it did get humiliating and toxic at some points. So that was pretty typical at 7:30 in the morning on a Monday. So yeah, I mean, I had met a lot of these consultants, and I remember thinking at the time, because I was still kind of, very far deep in, I was like, oh, these are such normal people. They seem very humble. Like, I can see myself doing this. And it was always, it was just kind of like that sort of thinking. But now looking at it, it was like, I can't see past the fact that they're still in this business. They're still using the same script. How do I really believe anything that they say now?
Yeah.
A lot of the owners that I've met too, I had done a lot of digging on them. And a lot of these people did come from a lot of money. So what I had noticed, and it was like, it's kind of sad to really give this sob story and pander to people who are actually struggling in life, when we know that you had a bed of money to lay back on.
Yep.
When you struggled. And it was like, I know that, say like my owner, for example, now I can't confirm, but I have suspected that his family comes from money. Just given the family background that he's shared with us. Apparently they own some John Deere dealership in Ohio. They know everybody in that town. And I had looked up like his hometown and everything. I saw the house that he lived in, and I was like, it was almost $1 million. And I'm like, see, I didn't grow up like this. And a lot of people in the office did not grow up like that. So the fact that you're trying to kind of put yourself into our shoes, like you went through the same thing, when I know that's not the case. If you needed money because you didn't close in the field, we knew that you had it. It's not like us who are actually out on our own or just really independent and just taking a lot of taking on a lot of responsibilities ourselves, when we know that you didn't go through the exact same thing. And you flashing your car, your suits and everything, we know that's that wasn't because of you working hard in the field. So using that to get us to start working harder and straining ourselves, I just saw it was very, very low. So
Yeah, it all goes back to the charade that is these Devil Corp companies, because yeah, the expectation is that these people became wealthy, became successful, doing what you're supposed to be doing. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said that their owner came from money, like they had an inheritance, or
Mhm.
they just had their family just had wealth from something that's completely different, and they use that family background to make themselves look more successful. So it's just to put on, it's a fake manufactured image.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure, all those bigwigs, Michael Sessions that you talked about. Yeah, we can't talk about Michael Sessions without mentioning the multiple lawsuits that have
Yeah.
been filed and that have his name on them.
Oh yeah.
um yeah, who knows? I don't know anything about Michael Sessions. He has a podcast. Everybody has a podcast. I know he's published a book, which I'm sure is not
Right.
worth the ink that it was printed on that paper, which is another reason why I would never take notes on anything he says either, because this ink is more valuable than anything that idiot has to say.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, I hope, and of course we're dealing with a company that targets young, inexperienced people who don't realize that there's a good chance that anyone that you come across on a daily basis could try to scam you or use you in some way. They're very naive to that fact yet. And this business takes everything from you. It requires you to put everything into it. And if you don't, or if you even appear to question anything they say, like you yourself, you weren't taking notes, and he called you out for being, I still don't understand the connection made between your goal of being driven by commission and being a very controlling person. I don't, maybe he was high on something that day, because it just doesn't make logical sense to make that
Yeah.
connection.
I don't know.
But then again, Michael Sessions has multiple lawsuits against him, and we can't really trust anything he says.
Right.
So, you finally got out, and you kept in contact with people that left, and you mentioned that was part of the reason why you got out. And in our first conversation, we were talking about, like, kind of just the overall picture of Cydcor, and you used the word cruel to describe Cydcor, and you continued by saying they'll give you a few crumbs, but it's all about making them, and I'm assuming you meant like your owner and the bigwigs, making them more. Which, I mean, we could argue, well, that's capitalism. You're going to give the employees $8 an hour, $9 an hour, while the CEOs are making 450 million and a bonus on top of that. Why is Cydcor any different than any of the other legitimate businesses that we have here?
Well, I 100,000% believe no one in their right mind stays there and works and actually enjoys it. The manipulation that you have to do with other people to get them to stay there is absolutely necessary. I don't think anyone truly gets up every day and goes to their office and says, wow, I'm so grateful for this job. I'm enjoying this. I'm financially stable. Everything is perfect. Couldn't have asked for anything better. You have to be delusional to work there. And, it sucks to admit that at one point I was 100% delusional,
Yeah.
but you have to be living in delusion to stay there. There's just no way that anyone is happy and okay with what they're doing there. The hours that people have to put in, and um, kind of just being closed off to the rest of the world. Like your only friends are the business. If you're not spending time with people in the business, you're setting yourself up for failure. It's cruel in that sense. Like they truly made me feel like I couldn't go anywhere else. It was always like, oh, you're going to be stuck working a 9 to 5. You know, you're going to get a promotion in like 5-6 years of like 2%. Yeah, you're just going to make someone else money. Which, yeah, like a lot of corporations, you know, in this country, yeah, they kind of exploit their workers. But, you know, this is cruel in the sense of like, they have to brainwash you. They have to put you in this delusional state of mind to stay there. Now, other jobs, I mean, I'm working at a normal job right now, but you know, if I wanted to get up and leave, I don't feel obligated to stay there. I don't feel like I have no other opportunity anywhere else. If I were to leave my current job right now, I would kind of just, you know, get up and leave. But that job, you know, they put this fear around you, like you're not going to find anything else. You're going to be stuck. And I think my owner knew that that's something that I personally fear. I think my biggest fear in life is just being stuck and miserable. And I think they really use that in the sense of like, oh, well, you're not going to have any free time if you go work somewhere else. You need to get to ownership so you can have that. You need to, you know, you need to stay here. You need to build your team. You need to spend time with your guys. You need to do all that so you can be an owner. And they even threw in, I mean, my owner would throw in the consultant all the time and be like, I know that you're not just going to be a great owner, but you're going to be a consultant. Like, and I think that really like kind of, I don't know, maybe stroke my ego a little bit, but it was like, oh, like he really sees that in me. I think it's just the whole like, yeah, mental and emotional aspect of it. You literally have to be brainwashed to stay there and, you know, continue working there. Because yeah, I mean, I felt like I would be stuck if I went somewhere else. I wasn't going to be happy. I wasn't going to make the money I wanted to make, even though I was literally making like a few hundred a week.
Yeah.
And you know, I think the whole emotional part of it too, like you're letting down your team, you're letting down your leader, because when it came to every single person that has left around the same time as me, we all generally said the same thing. It was, I didn't want to leave you guys. I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to leave my leader. I wanted to see my leader get promoted. I was trying to stay there to help them get promoted. It's always an emotional tie that keeps people there. It's never really anything else. And that's why I'm led to believe that, I mean, they have to kind of string you along and kind of play with your emotions a little bit just to get you to stick around. Because otherwise, I mean, yeah, who in their right mind wakes up every day and is like, I'm so excited for leaders meeting. I'm so excited for the field. Can't wait to see if I close. Like, it's just, it's miserable. And the sad part about it is my parents knew right away the kind of business I was getting into. And they would ask me, they were like, are you sure it's not like an MLM? Are you sure it's not a pyramid scheme? And of course, you know, we're always told, oh no, this is why it's not XYZ here. And, you know, I'd kind of get a little defensive with them and be like, no, it's not, like everything's fine. And I think they saw how I was over time. Like I was never around. I was always out. I was so tired. I didn't interact when I would come home. I wasn't really eating. Yeah, I mean, everyone around you can see it, but you. So it just, I have no other choice but to believe you have to be living in a state of absolute delusion, because there's just no way that anyone sits there and is completely happy with their situation. And even though at one point I was pretty happy, I was like, oh, like this is great, this is fun. I think when I initially started in the business, it was good. Because yeah, I mean, I had just left college. I wanted to be around fun people in that environment. And mainly everybody was generally around the same age as me. Yeah. So at one point I was having a good time. And the money was okay at the time. Yeah. But I think over time I was just like, yeah, this isn't going to work. If I stay here any longer, I'm going to be in big trouble. So,
Sure.
mhm.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that there has to be some type of delusion there for the reasons you mentioned, the manipulation. And I think that's essentially what Michael Sessions was talking about when he said, get to know your team and tailor your message to them. What he was actually saying is learn how to manipulate them, learn how to use their interests and their passions and their emotions against them so
Mhm.
that you can break them down, so that you can remold their rewiring their brain, I think you said earlier, which is exactly what happens here. And we're all saying the same thing here: manipulation, delusion, rewiring your brain, brainwashing. We can call it 8 different things. We're talking about the same thing. And this is systematic through Cydcor, Smart Circle, Credico, Cobra Group, through all of these companies. And it's I can't honestly remember who said it, but it was an interview I did years ago who said, um, there's a lot of people that get to the point, like to the level of success that your owner is in, where they realize, some people will realize that, this is a scam. I am manipulating these people, but I'm good at it and I'm successful at it and I can make a career out of this. I know for a fact, my first owner in Smart Circle, she's a regional consultant. She's very manipulative. And I'm convinced that she knows she scams people and that she is willing to make a career out of it. And another reason they target these young, like you said, fresh out of college, or in some cases, even fresh out of high school individuals, is that, making $1,000 a week, even though with no benefits, with nothing else, can be appealing to that demographic, especially if they don't realize there are so many other opportunities out there. And that's why they fill you with these lies of, this is the only place you can be successful. You don't want to be one of those 9-to-5 losers, one of those losers that has a retirement account and has healthcare benefits and dental and vision benefits, those
Right.
losers,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to be like one of those people. You want to be independent of everyone and everything.
Oh
And
yeah. Mhm.
and I'm sure your life has improved 1,000% since you left Cydcor. I mean, in
Oh,
the time within 2 years after I left Smart Circle, I bought a house. I mean, and I work in education, which is not very well funded, but I still make about 3.5 to 4 times more a year than I did when I was working for Smart Circle. But they have to tell you those lies to keep you there. It's all a part of the brain rewiring, because why would you want to, if you've been offered this ultimate opportunity, why would you want to go look for another job? Why would you want to go through the whole process of doing the resume and posting the resume and applying for jobs when you're already in the greatest opportunity in the world?
Mhm.
Even though 99.9% of 99.9% of people get nowhere. And I'm including owners in that. They get nowhere.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know. And when we interviewed people, they were always like, look for their hot spots, look for, what they're looking for, growth, you know, uh, performance-based structure and, company culture and things like that. And I think at the time I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to be making 6 figures right out of college. I just need something with a lot of growth, because if I can just get my foot in the door early, I'm good. And I also was, fresh out of college. I was like, I want to be in a fun environment still. I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to put on a pantsuit and just be boring. So I think, it really just appealed to me right out of the box. And I remember getting the offer like literally just a couple days later. And yeah, like I had said, I was interviewing all summer on Zoom,
Mhm.
all summer. So I was kind of shocked at how quickly he got back to me, because I was like, normally I wait at least a week or two to hear back from the interviewer.
Yeah.
And it was like, can you start Monday? And at that point, I had been doing nothing that summer. So I was like, you know what, fine, I'll start Monday. So it was like the first week of August. And I know I'd started with a few other people. They all kind of dropped off at some point during the week because they didn't know that they were going to the field. They didn't know what it was. And I know that it's very common for people to not know. But the main difference is that I actually knew that I was going to be doing door-to-door sales because I was already looking at sales jobs. I knew what B2B meant.
Yeah.
So to an extent, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. Not fully though. Obviously, I didn't know the office dynamic. I didn't know how long we'd be in the office for and, you know, things like that. So I think right off the bat, it was a little bit of a different way I started in the business, just because I had a friend in the business, and of course he easily introduced me to everybody. I was welcomed with open arms, and you know, it was already like too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because you know, when you first graduate college, like you're kind of nervous for your first job. You're like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know the people I'm going to be working with. So I think it was just, yeah, it was all too good to be true. I was like, everyone here is like really cool. They're young. This is a fun environment. I mean, in the mornings, I know in atmosphere, we would always mess with the Alexa and play, you know, crazy music in the morning. So I was like, wow, like I still get to feel like I'm in college, and this is a big girl job. So I think that was kind of like my mindset for a little bit. And I'll admit, you know, the days on Quill, I did fairly well. You know, I started growing my team within just 3 weeks of being promoted into leadership. You know, my leader was very, very good at sales. We were always, you know, doing the high roller speeches and things like that. You know, my first leader, I got her, 3 weeks into being into leadership, and I had grown a really, really close relationship with her. And it was funny because I know a lot of people started noticing that I was very close with her, and they were always very nosy, like, what are you two talking about? What are you two laughing about? Oh, I don't think you two should go on a team date today. Maybe you guys should go separately. Like, it was always just like, just got really weird. I kind of felt like, not blowing my head up or anything, I felt like there was a little bit of like jealousy of me in the office, because I kind of came in there, you know, I had a friend already, and I started kind of moving up a little bit quickly. So, you know, obviously the Quill days, everybody was kind of enjoying themselves. Everybody was fine. There was 2 senior leads in the office. So it was kind of like a head-to-head race of who was going to get promoted first. And I noticed that there was a lot of competition manipulation with that, between the 2 crews, a lot of gossiping and stuff like that, because it was always like very competitive between them two. They were close as friends, but I know that they had kind of used the 2 crews in the office as, you know, a good way to pin each other against,
Sure.
pin each other up against each other. So I think things just didn't start to get real, because at this point I was still like very, very far deep into the business. I was enjoying it. I was good with the money. I was moving up. And then I think things just didn't really set in until we had to switch campaigns. Because that's when we saw just how screwed up things were. And you know, me and the people that have left, we always talk about it. If we did not have to switch off of that campaign, we'd probably still be there. And you know, obviously at some point we would have to kind of come to terms with reality of, okay, the money's not actually that great, and you know, being an owner is not what it seems like, because like I had mentioned earlier, my first leader, she ended up leaving the business before I did. So I think that's when things started to kind of go downhill from there on out. Back in March, we both went to the Keys to Success conference. I know that a lot of the rewards and punishments in the office was being invited to certain things, not just being able to get interviews and hold meetings, run campaign meetings. And obviously, if you were not really closing, you didn't get to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But also just getting invited to certain things, dinners and conferences and trips, things like that. If you weren't doing well, you didn't get invited. So I was kind of hoping to get invited, only because I honestly just wanted to go on a trip. It's March, it's cold in Illinois, and I wanted to go down to Orlando. And I think that was the time where it was either you were going to dive into the business even more, or that's when you kind of stepped back and said, okay, there's something really off here.
Mhm.
I think I started to kind of just not really care much anymore at this point, because we were learning how to close on a different campaign. I was selling internet rather than office supplies, and it was very, very difficult to switch from that. And I was kind of like, okay, maybe this conference, it's either going to shed some light somewhere, or it's going to go the other way. And I think I'll admit I was there mainly to kind of party. Like it's actually, at the time I thought it was like cool, but now that I think about it, I'm like, this is very weird. I had stayed in a vacation villa with 15 other people,
Wow.
and it was, yeah, when I told my parents about this, they were like, so your boss kind of allowed all this to happen, and you guys don't get your own rooms, your own beds. And mind you, on every business trip I've had to share like a room or a bed with somebody. And at the time I did not think it was weird. I was just like, okay, like we're cool with each other, so I guess it's fine. But now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's very weird. It was always this too close for comfort kind
Yeah.
of feeling with the office. So yeah, there was 15 of us. I think there was 3 offices total that kind of shared the Airbnb. And I remember getting there and immediately, now mind you, my owner, he's like 34, 35. So not that young, but it was just a big like frat party there. Like we had random people over that I guess somebody knew that was in town, and it was like drinking until 3 a.m. And it got a little, yeah, it got a little chaotic. And I just remember thinking like, Michael's not usually like this. Like, is he just trying to kind of pander to us and
Mhm.
be cool, or like, what is this? But at the time I was kind of just like taking it as it comes. I was like, all right, I'm here to party. Like, I don't really care about the conference. So I remember like going to the conference the next day, and it was big flashy lights and party favors and drinks and everything. And it was all very, very young people, the stage with all the lights and the confetti and all that. And you either said, wow, this is so cool, or wow, this is really weird. Like it was one of the two reactions. So I think at the time I was like, okay, like I don't really know what to think of all this. So when we had went to all of our breakout rooms, which was basically a consultant just talking about their own brainwashing topic. And we were given like little notebooks, and of course, take your notes, pull out your notebook. That was always just like a thing for us, and I couldn't stand it because I was like, I don't think I need to take notes.
Mhm.
I'm not in school anymore. So I remember kind of just trying to listen to what the consultants were saying and see if it was anything like really worth like actually noting and applying to my life. But they all, yeah, generally said the same like sob stories, how they started, and how they overcame things. And I think they know that that is going to pander to people that are actually dealing with those problems, people who actually have things to overcome in life. So it was kind of like I just didn't really know what to do with all this information when I was at the conference. But like I said, I kind of just was at a point where I just didn't really care anymore. I was just there to party. And coming back from the conference, we were expected to run meetings on what we learned, and write a whole like paper on our takeaways. And I was like, I feel like I'm back in college. Like, I kind of just started getting frustrated with things like, why am I being asked to do this? And then of course my first leader, she ended up getting really sick, coming back from the conference. So she wasn't able to work, obviously. She was like in the hospital with like a very high fever. And I remember my owner just being like, okay, so when are you coming back? And she's like, I'm like in the hospital right now, like, please don't ask me. And I remember kind of just getting like almost upset for her, because she had been struggling with the new campaign, and she lives on her own. She pays a mortgage. She's got more expenses than me, and she was kind of already like losing it, didn't really want to be there anymore. And I wasn't the type of person to sit there and say, no, you need to stay, you need to stay. I was more of like, hey, if you're not happy, like, go. I wouldn't want you to come in here every day miserable and not wanting to be here. So I know that my owner didn't like that. Of course, we're taught to manipulate our own crew members and get them to stay, get them to stick around. And I think that was the only thing I was missing, as a person that would excel as an owner, was I was not willing to sit there and tell people, hey, you need to stay. I need to keep growing my crew. Like, I knew it was selfish. And, I actually cared for her as a person. I'm like, hey, if you're not happy here, you're not making the money that you want to be making, you can't even pay your bills, like, please, like, go somewhere that, is going to fulfill those needs. I'll be okay. And I think, because we were very close as an entire office, that I think even she admitted, she was like, I didn't want to leave you. I know that you were working on getting promoted and stuff. And I just sat there and I'm like, look, what's going to happen is going to happen. If it's meant to happen, it will. But I'm going to be fine. And I know that my owner didn't like that. He was always trying to get me to talk her into staying another week. And I know that it was really, really hard on her. And I said, hey, you need to go. Like, take it as, a chance to find something that is going to make you happy. Like, it's not fair. It wouldn't be fair for me to ask you to stay, or anybody here. So, and I think we kind of came to the conclusion that either our owner knows exactly what he's doing, or he's also very, very delusional. Because I'm like, someone is literally telling you, I am miserable here. I am not making enough money to even pay my mortgage. How can you sit there and tell them, no, you need to stay another week, or just give it another shot. Oh, just try this. Just try maintaining your attitude. Or, it's very like belittling. So, and I think that's when I started to see, kind of her departure from the business. That's when I started to see like, something's very, very off. It was honestly just a buildup of red flags over time. So, that Verizon campaign was an absolute pain in the ass. It's very new. And I think what really drove me away, or this is the point where I said, all right, I need to leave by when this happens. So we're selling internet. We're selling routers, shipping them out to people for their businesses. And if the internet wasn't working for somebody and they go and cancel within the first, I think, 45 days, the commission got retracted back. And, I know that was a thing with Quill if like the order didn't go through, like they didn't pay their invoice, but like it wasn't very, very common on Quill. So I didn't even realize that retractions were like a real thing until Verizon. So I was like, okay. So when I start seeing things come out of my check, that's when I need to absolutely get out, because I remember bringing that up to the owner and I was like, I don't see how that's really fair. Like, I'm telling them it's a great product, the internet's going to work, and then it doesn't. And then it gets taken out of my check. And, his response was kind of just like, well, it's to prevent like soft selling. And I'm just like, how does anybody soft sell this product? You have to hand over your tax information.
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of just like, I don't see how this is fair. And, of course, these people, they try to get in contact with Verizon themselves. And then I was like, do they even know that they have Cydcor reps selling their product? Because it seemed like it was a whole different like department. It was like very, very separated from like legitimate Verizon people.
Yeah.
And us, because we had like a dinky little tag with like a very low quality printed photo of us and our information, what Cydcor ICL we were at, to show people when we would go and sell it. So I would run into other Verizon reps from actual stores
Yeah.
when I was in the field, and I was like, why is this a thing? Like, I thought, of course they hype up, the client, and like, oh, they really want to grow. They really want to, acquire more customers. So that's why they come to us.
Mhm.
And I'm like, they already have reps. So why does Verizon, a huge, huge company, need Cydcor? Like, why do they need us? They literally have reps. And I mean, Verizon does have a pretty good reputation. So I was like, it just, none of it made sense. And I think, obviously with everything building on top, not making money, just being miserable in general, at some point I was going to burst and explode. But I think what really set the tone for everybody leaving, not just me, was, mind you, when we had switched to Verizon, we had the B2B side and then we had the residential side. And I didn't want to do residential just for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
So I was like, I'm already used to the B2B schedule. I might as well just stay on it. So I guess Verizon, the home internet, had been established for a while. So they started retracting from checks like a long time ago. So that was a thing before B2B, because B2B was very, very new. So the home internet side, they were getting so many sales retracted that out of like $1,000, they were only actually getting paid like 200 every week. So my owner had got them off of that campaign and put them on some like solar energy campaign, which I didn't know too much about those. I know a lot of consultants were doing the solar campaigns. So he, kind of was just like, we're going to take care of them, make sure that, they're doing something stable, because, the Verizon home internet it's not working out for them.
Mhm.
And I'm just kind of like thinking, okay, makes sense, but B2B is also not doing well and also not making money either. So I don't know where that kind of came from.
Mhm.
So it was like my owner eventually started to just focus on the other side of the office when he put them on this solar campaign. And there was people on Verizon still just struggling and not doing well. People were quitting. Entry levels would come in, stay for a day, and then leave. And it was always like our owner just didn't really care. I think we could sense that he wasn't focused on us at all. And when we had asked him, hey, like, I think you need to go to the field. I think you need to see what we're dealing with because we're not making money. All you have to say is every morning is, so how are we hitting our goals today? And everyone's just sitting there like, we don't effing know because no one's making any money here. So I remember we had asked him like, hey, I think it would be very beneficial if you came to the field with us, just so you can see what we're dealing with, why people are not closing. And his response was always like, I focused on you guys for the last like 5-6 months. I need to focus on my other guys. It was always just like, I don't have time for you. So I think as soon as we got the sense that he wasn't caring anymore, we all kind of just stopped caring. And then it was just a domino effect after that. And I think now that we've all left, some of the last few people that left after us, they said that he ended up like admitting, saying like, I knew I dropped the ball on that. And he moved them off of Verizon. So it was a very long process of like just going back and forth. You know, people were genuinely struggling. People were literally visibly miserable going into the office every day. And it was always like, don't worry, guys, we're going to figure this out. Like the average rep makes $900 every week. And I remember when I left, he was like, why is it that you think the average rep makes this much money? Why aren't we doing that? And I'm like, if I knew why that is, I wouldn't be leaving. And I said, I don't have time to sit here and figure it out, because it was always like, well, why don't you set up a one-on-one with, you know, the top 5 reps? And I did that. I was calling reps all over the country. They have no idea who I am. And, you know, I just got generally the same responses. And I'm like, I don't know what the secret is to this, but I'm not willing to sit here and figure it out. And I straight up told him that. He's like, well, every campaign goes through this when they're piloting it. You know, everybody has their struggles. So why isn't that we can't figure it out? And I'm like, look, I'm not going to sit here and spend more time trying to figure it out, spend more money trying to figure it out. And I'm not going to make my team members do that either. If they're unhappy and they want to go, they can. I'm not their mother. I'm not going to sit here and tell them what to do, because his big thing also was, should I expect other people to leave as well? And I said, the office can do whatever they want. So it was honestly like, and I know this had been brought up in probably one of your interviews or the documentary, but it's very, very true that when people leave, it's never on a good note. It's never a happy ending. It's always somebody's hurt, either just mentally, emotionally, financially. Somebody's hurt. It's never a good departure ever. And I think so many of us were very, very just hurt by the experience of, you know, dealing with that, dealing with, you know, the same redundant thing every day, sitting in the field miserable and not making money, but yet we felt so obligated to stay there. And, you know, whether it was because of a friend or, you know, we're really stuck on this opportunity, which I think a lot of us knew that it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but they just obviously weren't advertising that. So yeah, I mean, how everybody kind of left, it was not on a good note. Everybody was, you know, upset and hurt in some way. I know I was very emotional because, you know, my leader was my friend for like the past 5 years. Like I've known him, and I wanted to see him get promoted too. I wanted to be there for my team members. And, you know, they made it very clear that I let down my team and I could have been senior lead if I didn't quit. And I was like, well, I guess everything is just right out of reach. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of just a rough ending to everybody leaving, because it was just a big domino effect. And, yeah, I mean, it was just rough in general. So no one thought it would end that way. Nobody planned on doing that. It just kind of happened. I think everyone kind of just lost it at some point.
Yeah. So you've been out for about 2.5 months now. How is your life different now? Your day to day, your mental health recovery from Cydcor, if you will.
Well, the job that I do right now, so I'm still in sales, but it's a little bit different. Um, it's been great. It's been a great change, not just like physically, whereas I'm not waking up before the sun comes up anymore. Um, I'm at a normal job where I get to work normal hours. I still have time when I come home and I can spend time with my family or make a meal. And that's not something I'm like really used to. And I think it just felt really, really weird because I was so used to working very long hours, being up really, really early, and not being on a normal eating schedule. And I think just having a normal schedule where I can wake up and I'm not on such a time crunch, because every morning it was like, I need to be ready by this time. I need to be my food made, everything, because I needed to beat traffic every morning. It was like, go, 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 go. And now everything is very like, I can move at my own pace.
Yeah.
So it feels great. I mean, um, I don't wake up every day like sick with anxiety. Like I'm not walking into an office, standing in an elevator, like literally feeling this anxiety in my stomach anymore, because that's exactly what I would feel every day going into the office. But now I, the work I'm being asked to do now is very reasonable for what I'm being compensated for. And I will say my first paycheck alone, just training, was higher than any check I've ever received working at Cydcor. And I was like, I'm almost kind of kicking myself, like, why did I take so long to leave? But I think everyone kind of goes through that situation at some point. But I mean, being in normal working conditions where I'm not walking around a sketchy town and being followed to my car and being watched, I'm in a comfy office. I'm surrounded by normal coworkers. Now, am I like besties with everybody at my new job? No. But it's nice not having people in your business all the time. People kind of respect your privacy now. And I mean, I still work at like a restaurant in the restaurant industry, so I get food every day. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm gonna gain back some weight, but it's gonna be some happy weight, because I had lost
Happy weight. Nice.
Yeah, happy weight, because I had lost 26 pounds since I started working at Cydcor. And I was like, I'm gonna be like living normally. I'm gonna be on a normal schedule. I'm gonna be eating and sleeping, and I'm gonna be compensated for it. I mean, no job is 100% great and dandy and super easy, but like the whole point was I was not being compensated for the things I had to do in the field. So now I'm like, okay, I feel like my compensation is pretty fair for what I have to do every day. I feel more obligated to work. And it's funny because, yeah, a lot of my managers now, they're like, why are you staying so late and working so much? And I'm like, I'm just kind of used to it. I'm kind of just used to working 10, 11 hours a day. And they were like, literally go home. Like, if anything, they're like, no, take care of yourself, go home. And if I'm not feeling good, go home. At Cydcor, it was like, well, I don't know, suck it up. Like, we don't care. So, it's nice to have a company actually like kind of care about you, and they're going to compensate you for what you're being asked to do. So life has greatly improved, I will say.
Good. And that's what an actual job will do. That's what an actual opportunity will do, is that they will put you first. They will say, you've done enough, go home, or take care of yourself. That's something that the only place I've never heard that was working in these double corp companies, is take care of yourself. And that's the primary difference, is that they don't care about you. Anywhere else you work, there's some semblance of value put into their employees. But it's Cydcor and all these devil corp companies. You are, if you're making them money, great. But the second you stop making them money, then you're just garbage, and they're going to toss you aside. There's no value there.
Oh yeah, that's 100% true. There was a lot of like bullying, like humiliation between other like leaders, and it was always kind of covered up. Mind you, the HR person was engaged to the owner. So
well, how about that?
Yeah, I know that that's pretty typical, which I'm just trying to think of like all the very odd things that were just so normalized in Cydcor. Marrying your recruiter and your HR person and all that. I remember I think what also felt cruel to me in that business was, I tried to express how I felt, and I'm always like very outspoken. When there's a problem, I'm usually the one that speaks up because I know there's people who don't. And, I know people can appreciate somebody who just doesn't give a shit. So, anytime I had spoken up, I just always felt like I was shut down, and I was told to just kind of keep my mouth shut. I was always being pulled aside into the office and just told to stop talking about certain things. And, I remember there's one time how they would control what we're kind of saying. There was one time I was at a team night, and I had fun at the team nights, I'll say that, but over time I think I got sick of it, and I was like, I don't want to drive here after the field. I would just want to go home.
Sure.
And I remember, there was one team night I was kind of like, I didn't really want to be there, but I wanted to hang out with everybody. And I was like, it was some bar in Chicago. Like, mind you, we're in the suburbs, our territories, and then, we're going downtown during the week, which is, a far drive for a lot of us. And I remember, I was kind of like in this very stressed out state of mind. I didn't know how I was going to pay my car payment that week. And yet I was still expected to go to this team night because we did throwdowns this one Thursday. And I know when I was there, I was to buy everybody shots at this bar because the person I had went against beat me by like $40. And I sat there and I said, I'm broke. I'm not buying everybody shots. And I know the next day, my owner had pulled me aside and said, don't ever say that in front of anybody ever again. And I was like, what do you mean? Like me being broke? And he was like, yeah, you don't want other leaders or even entry levels to think that you're not making money or that you're broke. And I sat there and I said, Michael, I literally don't know how I'm going to pay my car payment this month. I am broke. And he's like, I know it's like a habit of saying that. Like people say that all the time, like, oh, I'm so broke. Like, and he was like, I remember just how much he had an issue with me saying that. And I was like, but it's not a lie. Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my car payment right now. So he's like, but you don't want other people to know that. You don't want other people to think that you're a leader and not making money. But the funny thing is that we know how much money everybody makes in that office. I mean, they plaster the numbers on the TV every morning. I know how much money this person makes and that person makes, every entry level. So it's not really a secret. But I remember that kind of upset me. And obviously I'm in a very stressed out state of mind. And I kind of walked out of the office and I had like tears in my eyes. And of course, didn't want to cause a scene. So I just went straight downstairs to my car in the parking lot. And I remember some people had asked him, what kind of conversation we were having, what's going on with me. And he was just like, I don't effing know what her problem is. Like, kind of just like, she's problematic. And that just never made me feel very good. And of course, I couldn't go to HR. There's no HR because it was his fiance, which, she's really nice. Don't have much against her besides, I don't think she actually did any work, to be honest, because every time I'd look over at her laptop, she was shopping. So it was just very odd. It's very easy to feel like you just don't have anybody. As close as you can be with your leader and other people in the business, I just knew I couldn't 100% trust anybody because anything I said always got out. It was always an issue with whatever I said. I couldn't ever freely speak my mind. And I think that's the part that I thought was most cruel, because I just felt like I was trapped. Like I had a muzzle on me all the time. I could not say anything. If I was upset that day, I had to go hide it. If I was tired, I had to hide that and, not nag everybody out. And there were just several times where I was on business trips, and mind you, like our owner wouldn't really go on the business trips. Sometimes he would like meet up with us. It just depended on where we were. I remember there was a couple business trips where, because he wasn't around, some of the leaders in the office would literally like humiliate me and yell at me in front of everybody about, things that were coming out of my mouth, me being negative. And, it's like dead of winter. It's freezing outside. Some of us are on foot in the field. So yeah, a lot of us were uncomfortable with that. And it almost felt like it was just like being in the military. It was like you could not like say anything. You couldn't backtalk, nothing. And I always just felt like I had to just zip my mouth shut, and I didn't like that. And I know there was one business trip we went on to Little Rock. Now this I had a huge problem with, and I don't think he really realized what the problem was. Little Rock is about 9 hours from here where I live. And I wanted to go, but I didn't really want to take my car for obvious reasons. I didn't want to have to drive. And I was told I had to take my car because this person's car is too small. This person's car is going to break down. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll take it, but I don't want to drive the whole time. So as long as somebody can switch off with me, somebody that I trust to drive my car too, because I don't do well with long car rides. So I ended up just being like, okay with it. And then I remember going down there, and one of the guys that my owner had promoted, he was trying to pilot like a satellite office in Little Rock with Verizon, the home internet. And we were told, oh yeah, you guys will get to meet up at his office and, kind of do morning atmosphere there. Otherwise, if we weren't visiting another office, we would do morning atmosphere in the Airbnb. And yeah, we couldn't eat breakfast. We had to be all ready and dressed by 7 a.m. and, practice pitching in the living room of an Airbnb. It was very odd. But I remember, going down to Little Rock, and it was this like satellite office. Mind you, I had gotten really sick like one day into the trip. And of course, it's like 9 hours away. So I'm like, I'm stuck here. But I knew that if I asked to stay behind at the Airbnb and not go to the field, I knew I would have been ripped into. So I just kind of went and got medicine, kind of just was like, okay, I'm just going to deal with it. And I remember we had to go to, this guy's office in Little Rock, which, no offense to the city, but it's very dangerous over there. And it wasn't the type of area I thought we were going to be in. not a good area for people to be on foot. And I remember going to that office building, and he didn't even actually have an office there. We were just doing atmosphere in the lobby, which I thought was very odd. But I remember that day, my owner had actually came down to meet up with us because obviously he was close with the guy that was piloting that stuff down there because he had promoted him out a couple years ago. So I remember just feeling like absolute garbage. Like I had tunnel vision. I was very, very sick and I really wanted to leave. And I remember kind of just stepping off to the side and like kind of just taking a breather. I was crying a little bit. I wasn't feeling good at all. And of course, they were just like, instead of kind of like showing concern about my health, they, this other owner and then my owner kind of pulled me aside and were like, this is what we were just talking about. Like, we see something so special in you that we know that you're very different. You're going to be such a great owner, such a great consultant. And I was just like, are you not like acknowledging the fact that I'm like going to pass out in the lobby right here of this office building? It was just very just crazy the way that things were, and we were just expected to kind of just accept it and just deal with it. The whole sick thing, obviously since COVID's been around, like, you'd think that people would be a little bit more cautious, but in Cydcor, like, they did not care. It was like, nope, you still need to work. So yeah, I mean, it was just it just shocked me that every time I was sick, I was expected to still work. And of course, most of the time I did, unless I was like actually in bed with a fever. Most of the time I did still go and work because I simply just couldn't afford to not go to the field. And my boss knew that. And there was just no remorse, no nothing at all. So
yeah, all of those things they tell you, especially about not like your Michael telling you to not say certain things, it all comes back to controlling. Because even if it's the truth, nothing about Cydcor is related to the truth. They need to keep up this facade of everyone is successful, everybody's making money. Doesn't matter what the reality is. I'm sure your owner, you voiced your suspicions earlier about Michael having a wealthy family. That makes a lot more sense in being successful in Cydcor than actually doing anything that requires work. So it's all about keeping up the image.
Right.
One of the things that I hear from a lot of people who I talk to in these interviews is, I hope it has an impact. I hope that it can help one person. And I want to make sure we recognize that, because when we talked on the phone, you said that one of our recent videos, we interviewed two wonderful young women named Meghan and Shelby, who were Cydcor reps, and you found particular value in that video, correct?
Yeah.
What spoke to you about their experience?
Honestly, I think just how similar they kind of had their experience and how I felt. I mean, mind you, they also had mentioned that they were on the Verizon campaign. And I was like, oh, okay. So somebody kind of knows a little bit what's going on here. But also they were very spot on about like the cruelty and the mind control, the manipulation, stuff like that. I'm also kind of into, like the cult documentaries and shows like that. So it kind of just rang too many bells when I watched their interview, and their friendship kind of reminded me of my friendship with like my first leader and like some other girls on my team. So I think it kind of hit a little close to home, where it was like, two girls that, they very much so have their backs, and, they're there supporting each other, going through this experience together. And it's like, you kind of realize, like, as long as like you have this person like you can pretty much get up and leave from Cydcor and do anything that, you need to do. Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I mean, I don't know, I really like their interview. I think they were very straight up, and like I always appreciate that when it comes to people sharing their opinions. So yeah, I mean, like I said, their friendship reminded me of me and like my leaders and like my crew members, and just them describing themselves in the field, like being miserable and living off of like Wendy's 4 for 4s, because that was literally me and some of the people on my crew and just in the office in general. We would go through the McDonald's drive-through because that's all that we could afford, and we'd sit there in the field and just be like, okay, what do we do next? Because we don't want to work, but we're always trying to make it seem like we're working, either by splashing stuff in the group chat or whatever. And it was always that putting on that face like we were still there to be there for the big picture, but we both know that that's not the case, and we're both very unhappy. And I think it just it reminded me a lot of me and like some of my leaders, that we were both kind of just like, we knew that we're not happy, we know that we're not going to stick around much longer, but we just don't know exactly how we're going to depart. It's like we kind of just need something to push us over the edge. And I think just having people that I've been close with for so long in the office, seeing them leave, I think that's kind of what also pushed me to do it as well. And also seeing that my owner was completely like trash talking them after they left, when I knew their situation. And I knew what actually happened. So seeing him kind of manipulate the image for everyone else to see, I think that's kind of what pushed us to leave. But I very much enjoyed watching their interview too.